And good evening, everybody. Welcome to this weekly webinar. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad you're here. As Scott mentioned, we start with a little education each week. And for the past month or so, just because of the unusual situation going on in the world with COVID-19 and the coronavirus, I've been trying to do kind of aspects of self-care and grounding techniques and kind of emotional first aid. And in line with that theme, I just wanted to we haven't really touched on stress management in a while, and I thought that would be a useful topic to talk about tonight. It's certainly something I've been conscious of in my own life every day, trying to really practice it. And so I thought it'd be useful just to kind of go over some things. I have 6 things that come to mind for me. It's not a complete list by any means. There's endless numbers of things we can do for stress management, but I wanted to kind of group them just to summarize them in a certain way tonight. So the first one I have, and this is maybe not the first thing that comes to mind with stress management, but I think stress management and stress in general is so much in our heads. I think it's really important to drop into our bodies. So the first one I thought of actually was taking care of our bodies. And that means exercise, it means relaxing, it means breathing, it means eating well. But I think the exercise thing is something I've been really aware of because my routines are really disrupted, and I'm a pretty active person, and I have I have limitations right now in terms of what I can do and where I can go and all that. So I've been doing a lot more walking than normal, but I live in a hot climate, and you have to do it early in the day or late at night, and just there's a lot of limitations that interfere with my schedule. So anyway, the long story short is that it's a struggle, and I think, but it's something that we really need to do, whether it's exercise, whether it's stretching, relaxation. There are different kinds of progressive relaxation where you take each muscle group and tighten it up and then relax, working from your head down to your toes. Just something like that is pretty easy, but it's very, very effective to kind of move the stress. Because what happens with any kind of stress or chronic stress, which is what I think we're all experiencing right now, we're having this group experience, it is held in our bodies, and we need to help release it so we can get it out of our bodies. Breathing is something we've talked about here a lot. It's, breathing is really how we move emotions. It's how we move energy within our bodies, psychic energy included. And I think it's really important to do that deep breathing. We do 4-7-8 sometimes, other kinds of breathing. So whatever rhythm, whatever technique you use, you almost can't go wrong. But generally, I think people breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just really nice, slow, deep breaths. It can be really, really hugely beneficial and really change the physiology of stress. One thing about stress reduction, as I say, if we don't deal with it in the body as well as the head, it's going to be a limited effort. And then number 2, speaking of bodies, we have that thing in a 12-step program called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I think just, again, dropping back to that basic care, is going to be really important. So hungry. A lot of cartoons and memes floating around the internet of, people emerging from this epidemic with an extra 50 pounds because we're all eating. Thank God we have the food chain is working, but so hungry is important though, because I think we can sometimes get distracted, and we need to eat well, and we need to make sure we eat and get nourishment. The anger, that's a feeling that may be a key one. I think there's a lot of resentments building up, a lot of stress with people kind of confined to small spaces, living together for the first time maybe in a while with no outlets, no escape valves, where people's habits and people's issues and complications and petty grievances and all that stuff kind of get stirred up, and it gets stressful for people. This is a weird one in the context of this, but lonely. And I think it's absolutely true that we are having a lot of loneliness right now. We are a lonely society anyway, but for people that, and we're always saying that the essence of recovery is all about connection. And so connecting is a bit more of a challenge these days. It can be done. It can be done the way we're doing it here tonight on Zoom. There's Zoom meetings for 12-step programs. There's in the rooms. There's all kinds of ways we can do it. But it is something we have to consciously do. It just doesn't kind of happen. So I think we have to make a conscious choice to contact people. And finally, the T of HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And I think that can also impact our ability. When we're under stress, our sleep patterns get disrupted. And without adequate sleep, we're kind of just not good the next day. So there's all kinds of stuff. In fact, we should do a whole webinar on sleep hygiene sometime. But I think just not eating a lot before you go to bed, not getting to anything too stimulating before you go to bed, and especially probably not watching the news before you go to bed would be a good trick to help you sleep. The third one for stress management I talked about was basically an old friend of ours too, mindfulness, right? Learning how to just be aware of what's going on in our bodies, what we're feeling. I think probably if we were to have an app that measured it for us, we'd go through about 90% of our day kind of in automatic pilot and without really being conscious of what we're doing, what we're eating, what we're drinking, and just kind of going through the motions. And I think especially when we're basically confined to our residences, you know, I hear jokes about it. Is it Sunday? Is it Friday? Is it Thursday? It's like all kind of blending together. And so I think that ability to just kind of be mindful, to be aware, and honestly, this confinement is a little bit mind numbing to some extent. So it's a challenge. We really have to try that much harder, I think, to really make an effort to be mindful about it, to slow down, to be aware, and to notice what's going on with things. Notice the good stuff, notice, you know, the dust on your shelves, notice whatever it is you're noticing around the house, just to be aware and be fully engaged is a good thing. The fourth one, shift gears in whatever way you can. You know, I'm inside a lot. I'm doing kind of writing. It's too much time with the computer, frankly, not doing enough out and about. And I think really to shift gears in any way I can, I get up and walk, and go out and do anything recreation wise. And that obviously is limited right now, but relaxation, yoga, stretching, things that sometimes are done in group settings are now being done more in isolation. But I think we really need to make an effort to do that. At least I do, to kind of break up the rhythm of the day. Otherwise, it's this big, long kind of numbing kind of day. So being aware, shifting gears with recreation, relaxation. And the fifth one I put down is connecting with each other. And I mentioned that just a few seconds ago, but it's really all the more important. And I've made a habit, I mentioned I think last week, of reaching out every day to one or two people that I know who might be worried, might be lonely, might be needy of something, and just checking in with them. And the joy of having them be kind of delightfully surprised that somebody reached out is really cool, and it makes me feel good. And when people have done that for me, I know how it feels. It feels wonderful. Just that you're on somebody's mind, somebody's thinking of you, and that really is huge. It makes a great difference. So make the effort. Pick up your phone, do FaceTime, Zoom, whatever form it takes. Yell at your neighbor across the street through your window. It doesn't matter. Just that connection is going to be really, really important. And especially, I think, you know, that can be a range of social interactions. It'd be from casual interactions, just to say hello, but also during these times, we really need to be able to have meaningful conversations with certain people. So I think to stay in touch with sponsors, with trusted advisors, with good friends, where we can process stuff that's going on. Because although we're kind of in this weird change of living right now, our lives are continuing, right? Drama at the job is continuing. Marriages are having problems. You know, kids are acting out. I mean, life goes on. And so I think we really need to have our resources and our support systems still continue. They can't be totally shut down either, because we need those resources to deal with it. And finally, the last one, I just wrote down, go easy on yourself. I think these are times when we can really, those critical voices that are kind of chirping in our ears all the time can really start to get louder, because there's not enough other noise going on in our lives around them. And so we can really start to be hard on ourselves. And I think it's just that there's a lot of, I'm happy to see on the internet, a lot of kind of conscious effort to be kind to one another right now, which I think is wonderful and hugely important. But I would also add to that to be kind to ourselves, to really go easy. These are really hard times. there's people under financial stress, people under social stress. There's just anxiety. I live in the East Coast, and I've been, not personally, but I have friends who have been touched by this virus and the illness that goes with it. So I mean, it's around and it's there, and so we're doing the best we can. But I think we just need to kind of go easy on ourselves sometimes, because we can be really, really critical of each other and of ourselves. So those are my kind of quick and easy, dirty, cheat tips for stress management: taking care of your body, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, being mindful, getting as much recreation, relaxation as you can, connecting with each other, and going easy on ourselves. That's my quick summary.
Thank you, David. I always spell HALT for that with two A's, HAALT, hungry, angry, anxious, lonely, and tired. I think there's a lot of anxiety going around right now. And the best way to deal with the angry, anxious, and lonely is to reach out to other people. David hit that on number 5 with Connect. I did want to make a quick announcement, and it is, I gotta get this open, sorry. We're Seeking Integrity, Sex and Relationship Healing is partnering with In the Rooms on a Saturday once each month. The first one is this Saturday, April 18th, to do a Super Saturday Recovery Summit. So if you want something to do on Saturday, it's at intherooms.com. They're hosting it. There's going to be 3 speakers, one at 1 o'clock, one at 3 o'clock, one at 5 o'clock, and they're going to have kind of the same format that David and I have here, where they'll present for a little while and then take questions. The speakers this Saturday are Rob Weiss, Sophia Caudle, who's I believe a grief specialist, and Mark Anthony Lord, who's a spirituality and recovery specialist. And then I believe next month, David is speaking.
Yes.
Is that correct? So.
Okay. Yeah.
So check that out. And we've got questions rolling in. So let's go ahead and take some questions.
Good.
So the first one, this is from a heterosexual male with porn brain. And we can talk a little bit about what that is. It feels like there's a difference between people who are attractive and I want to kiss and hold and have sex with, like my partner, and people who are intensely arousing who I want to have sex with. Used a different word here, but I'll water it down a little. Think Jessica Rabbit and female porn stars. Okay. I'm in SLA, which is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and stopped using porn 4 months ago. Congratulations. Is it possible to get rid of porn brain and stop holding this body type as ideal, and or to merge, the porn turn-ons with real world?
Yeah, so when we fall into sex addiction or porn addiction or pair drug, it's a chemsex, it really kind of hijacks our arousal template, that map in our head of what we find appealing by sort of demanding higher intensity and novelty, and because of the tolerance that develops with addiction, we get used to things and we need more. And so it kind of leads us astray. And the problem with that is those are very high intensity stimulating fantasies and scripts and scenarios that really can't be replicated in real life. And so I think people find themselves, when they get their addiction under control, that their brain is still a little bit behind, because it's still trapped up in looking for that level of stimulation and intensity. And so I have found, well, one of the things we ask people to do is take a period, usually 90-day period of abstinence, sexual abstinence, no masturbation, no porn, no acting out, in order to let the brain start to kind of come back to earth and reset and regroup, if you will. But in that time, people can continue to go to those kind of high intensity fantasies and scenarios, and that really does slow down the process. And it really kind of keeps one foot into the addicted brain and one foot kind of out in recovery. And so we really recommend not entertaining that stuff. If you go there, and sometimes, like as with any trigger, any impulse, it's going to happen. We don't consciously maybe decide to do it, but if we get triggered, what is our responsibility is to then how do we manage it? And we don't kind of grab onto it. We don't entertain it. We don't go for a ride with that fantasy. We kind of let it go and come back and correct ourselves, and kind of gradually in that way we can retrain our brain to kind of not give into some of those addictive related kind of fantasies, porn brain, if you will. And so that ideal type thing is also important, I think, because most people have found that over time, they do have a certain set of characteristics, whether it's physical or emotional or intellectual or kind of their ideal type. And certainly with addiction, sex addiction particularly, people end up hooking up with all kinds of people who are not their ideal type, to say the least. And so to really kind of not succumb to just kind of these fantasy attractions or superficial attractions or objectified scenarios, but really to sort of go with your ideal type and take it slow. And we talk about even breaking kind of the hookup behavior and the patterns that that creates and the mindset it sets up, and the intimacy damage that it does and that kind of hookup mentality, but to really make a dating plan and take it slow and really get to know someone and really learn how to connect in a way that's really satisfying for everybody. So I think it's a matter of not entertaining that kind of old way of addictive thinking when we are aroused by something or someone, and to really kind of take it a little slower and to correct ourselves in terms of not objectifying and not falling into the mind trap of that scenario, but really being realistic and approaching that as a complete person, not just a piece of an objectified person that we might be seeing.
David just used the term objectification and talked about objectifying people. One of the things that porn addicts kind of complain about with the porn brain is they can't go for a walk without running everyone they see through the porn filter. Are they hot? Are they not? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? So that's issue number 17 on a long list with porn brain. The other thing is, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but a lot of guys, part of porn brain is erectile dysfunction with real world partners. You're able to perform with porn, but not with a partner. And it's because of the intensity that David talked about. The porn brain adjusts to that intensity. And we have to really step away for quite a while usually. Younger guys tend to recover quicker than older guys. I don't know your age, but anywhere from, I would say, about 90 days of pretty much total abstinence to close to a year with no porn and maybe not even masturbating. That's when the brain will really start to reset and get back to a baseline. So with the stuff that was great when you were 14 is great again, so, but it can take some time and patience is needed.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there definitely is porn brain is a thing. Yeah. So, okay, next question. I live with my parents in a small apartment with little privacy. Yesterday, I saw my father watching porn while me and my mother were sitting just a few feet away. I tried confronting him, but he just laughed at me. The computer browser history shows that he's been regularly watching porn from midnight to 7 a.m. Today, he asked me if I would be his accountability partner. I told him no, that would be inappropriate. Good for you. His response was, don't you want to show that you care about me? I'm feeling trapped and helpless. Should I try to get him help for his addiction or stay out of it? Very good question.
Wow. Yeah, really. I'm sorry for that whole situation, but sounds like you have an awful lot of awareness about it. Yeah, a couple of things in there. First of all, it speaks to that, one of those stressors I spoke of earlier with, we're all kind of in these situations where we're kind of confined together and living in close quarters and bumping up against different kinds of addictive behavior, much to our dismay sometimes, and as is the case here. So clearly there's a problem there with your father. Your answer was really spot on, in that situation requires a whole lot of boundaries. Not even talking about the physical limitations of being confined in the same place, but it's just inappropriate, and that's the great word. For you, you are not your father's accountability partner, nor should you be, nor should any member of your family be. That's just not the way it works. And the fact that your father was kind of so manipulative about it with his follow-up question, asking you if you don't care about him or not. I mean, that's kind of addict mind game stuff that is really unhealthy and unhelpful. And so I would encourage two things. I would Maybe you could refer him to the fact that he used the term accountability partner, I assume he has had some kind of recovery attempts or recovery experience, because that's not a term you normally hear people just throwing around. So refer him back to program, but I would also then perhaps get some support for yourself, because these are the kind of codependent partner, family of situations that really require some guidelines and some support, I would think, in setting boundaries for you, learning what's appropriate, what's not. Because when we're in that family system like that, it's really hard to get a good handle on, am I being a jerk, or should I be helpful? You know, kind of what's the right thing to do? Because it gets very confusing because of mixed loyalties and that sort of family dysfunction and poor boundaries and confused family roles of who's the parent and who's the child, and kind of all this kind of craziness that swirls around when there's an addiction in the house. And so I think getting some kind of support for yourself would be really useful. Some kind of 12-step partner program, whether it's a sex addiction program or not. Again, I don't know how old you are, so I'm not sure what options there are around where you are. But a lot of, like the addict programs, a lot of the partner programs are also online now. So you can check in with those. And we might have even something here on sex and relationship healing that might be appropriate for you. But
yeah, we have some pretty good. They're technically geared toward partners, but I would think a child of an addict could appropriately attend, as long as you're sort of 18 or up, or maybe even like 16 or up. Just we want 10-year-olds in there. But I also wanted to point out, this is happening a lot. Addictions are becoming sort of more obvious and obtrusive, and the friction is kind of growing in a lot of homes. Our treatment center is open because people are realizing, oh my God, usually it's the wife who says, you have to go now. I mean, we cannot be together 24/7 while you're doing this. You have to go to treatment now. So people are flying across the country and coming to treatment. And this is my sales pitch. So maybe that's a good idea. But yeah, at close quarters, things become more obvious and the friction can be more abrasive. And kudos for setting a boundary that you needed to set.
Yeah.
I think David covered that.
And I just want to underscore, it is not your job to get help for him. You can redirect him toward meetings, but whether he goes or not, that's not your responsibility and not your job at all. Your only job there is to get through this and to take care of yourself and get the support you need for you.
Next question here. How do I grieve after establishing no contact with a qualifier? A qualifier is somebody that this person has acted out with. My qualifier was the main source of support in my academic career, wrote letters of recommendation, which led to my current job. I'm struggling with the notion that I will never have contact with that person again.
Okay. So yeah, these relationships are significant in that they hold importance for us. They're often not really the healthiest dynamics sometimes, but they are significant relationships nonetheless. And they extend, as this person writes, not just in the sexual domain, but in other, they cross lines over into professional relationships and friendships, and it gets really, really complicated sometimes. But I think the grieving piece is just to start feeling it. These are, what I have found mostly is that the grieving task that needs to be done is to really grieve for the fantasy of what that person meant or represented, not as opposed to really even the reality sometimes. Because usually that person represented kind of an idealized version of something, a potential life, I can't even name all the possibilities, but it's almost a fantasy of the situation as opposed to the reality of the situation. I'll give you a parallel, and with some of the meth clients I work with, meth is a really intense drug and sex scenario. chemsex that goes with it. It can be very arousing for the first session or two, but it really quickly goes off the rails and gets really out of control and not pleasant at all. But people come in, having nearly killed themselves with strokes or cardiac arrests and from the meth overdoses with all kinds of physical complications, and they're grieving the fantastic experiences they were having on meth, and not so much, So it's really the romantic idea of the what if in their head as opposed to the reality. So that may or may not be helpful in your situation. But I think the only way to do it really is to really go through the grieving process. We addicts are great avoiders. We don't like to feel those feelings, and I think we'll kind of hang on to them, or not at least move into them and through them. And so I would really encourage you to find support from your recovery groups, from your therapist, from your sponsor, whoever is around to be supportive of you and to kind of talk you through this. Because the thing about grief is that we often feel, God, we avoid feeling it or touching it because it just seems so painful, and that if we ever really get into it, it's just going to be a bottomless pit of pain. And the thing about grief is that once we go through it, you do go through it. You come out the other side and you feel a whole lot better because of it. But I would just encourage you to kind of do this, get some support, and take one step at a time and start going through it and feeling it. For me, I usually try to combine grief, especially with rituals. That's just kind of my style. So, writing letters, writing and burning. I live near the ocean, so I'll have clients, put symbolic stuff of the relationship into a little bag and take it down to the beach and throw it on the white waves and let it be washed away, or whatever kind of works for you. I think it's good to have kind of a physical, symbolic release of that stuff too. Otherwise, it gets kind of this painful stuff in our heads going on. But I think the only way to do it is to take a step forward and just start to let it go, and to keep in mind that you're maybe letting go of some idealized version of reality that isn't quite the case in real life.
David, one of the things that I hear a lot is, I need closure. We need closure in a situation like this. Should somebody tell their qualifier, look, I'm not going to be answering your calls anymore or responding to your text? And if they do that, should they say, here's why? Or should they just disappear? Should they ghost, or should they say goodbye?
I think it kind of depends on the circumstance, but in general, I would say the less contact, the better. And so I think sometimes it's not really as mysterious if somebody just goes away, what's happened, if they were an affair partner or something like that. But, I guess it depends on the personal situation. I think, though, the best thing to do is to disengage as quickly as possible, and to not keep that person kind of in reserve or out there or holding out any kind of, the only benefit of closure, I think, is that there's a finality about it. And I think if somebody just kind of goes away, sometimes there's a little bit of a question mark left hanging. But I think whether that's done with actual physical closure, telling somebody, or just kind of being resolved not to contact them again, that finality does need to be there. And the person needs to be basically cut off. But closure is a funny thing. There's lots of times we need closure with people who are no longer here. I think, how many times have we wanted closure with parents or with somebody who we can't have that kind of physical closure with? So there are ways of doing that. Letters, that kind of thing, letters that never are received, but we can write, and it helps us therapeutically do that. I think sometimes if I'm the addict saying I need closure and I kind of want feedback, I think that becomes kind of this bottomless pit of need for reassurance, where just, or I had a client recently who said, if this person would just understand I've done all this growth and, why this happened, and it's just kind of really a mind game, really, to kind of stay connected. And they're still involved in the fantasy of interacting with that person, even though on different circumstances. So I think cutting it off is a really good idea. I don't know, Scott, what do you, what,
You know,
how would you answer your question?
I agree with that. You know, when I have somebody who's badgering me, oh, but I just need to call and have one, you know, I will let, you know, if they really can't let it go, and, you know, my answer is no, that's not a good idea. But if they really can't let it go, I will say, okay, you may send one text and I will write it for you. You know, dear so-and-so, I have entered a process of recovery and healing for sex addiction. As part of my recovery and healing, I can no longer be in contact with you. I will not respond to phone calls, emails, texts, or any other means of communication. Please respect this. You know, and they're done. That's it. I mean, there's nothing else that other person needs to know. You know, wanting to put any more than that in there is you know, claw marks. You know,
Yeah.
don't want to let go. So yeah, but I try to get them to just drop it. But if they won't let it go, I let them send one text, and then I personally go in their phone and block the number. So yeah. So I've stopped using porn for 6 months now, but I keep resetting the clock on no masturbation. I usually act out, I assume that means masturbate, because I can't fall asleep or I've just woken up and want to go back to sleep. And now that I've been in quarantine, it's even more difficult to establish a regular sleep schedule. What do you recommend for staying abstinent? I assume this is total sexual abstinence for a period of time.
Right. Yeah, so when I hear people are using, you know, masturbation to sleep or to go back to sleep, it's really all about self-soothing and using masturbation for self-soothing, which there are other ways to soothe oneself and fall back to sleep, or to ease stress or whatever the feeling may be that is uncomfortable. So I think kudos to you for that commitment. I think it's, you know, it pays off big time. But I think what's happening there is that there's a need to, you're using masturbation as a way to control or manage your feelings, and not for sex, not because we have a physiological need to masturbate, not because we're going to die if we don't masturbate, but just to soothe and go back to sleep. So I think I would really explore other ways of soothing yourself so that you don't get into trouble with your own commitment not to masturbate. And there are different ways to do that with sleep. You know, warm baths can help relax. There's the common recommendation: if you wake up and can't get back to sleep, get up and do something else for a while. And then until you get sleepy, read a book, and until you then go back to bed and fall asleep. And the other thing is to not use your bed really except for sleep, or if you're sexual, for sex. But, you know, I think Americans especially tend to kind of live in their beds, they eat in their beds, they watch TV in their beds, they do everything in their beds, and at some level it confuses our brains a little bit. So that's all. If you Google sleep hygiene, there's all kinds of really good recommendations about that. But to me, it's about that self-soothing behavior that is old. I think a lot of guys have gotten in that habit because masturbation, like other sex, does release certain kind of hormones and a sense of well-being, and it serves a purpose. But you're undermining yourself, and it's self-defeating. So I would look into other ways of helping yourself be soothed to go back to sleep. Tea, by the way, too. Warm beverages are also quite wonderful. Can't hear you, Scott.
I wanted to talk a little bit, kind of in relation to what David just said. You may want to talk to your therapist, your 12-step sponsor, you know, your accountability partner, whoever you're working with on your sobriety, to figure out where masturbation fits in your sobriety plan. You know, for those who don't know, sexual sobriety, this is what we use at Seeking Integrity. Rob uses it in his books. I use it all over. We use kind of a circle plan, and there's 3 circles. The inner circle is your bottom line problem behaviors: no porn, no prostitutes, no cheating on my wife, no, you know, if you do one of those things, you've lost your sexual sobriety. The middle circle is slippery stuff. driving through the neighborhood where prostitutes hang out, you know, being online alone, you know, keeping secrets. And then the outer circle is healthy behaviors that we can use to, instead of our addiction. So going for a bike ride, exercising, going back to school, you know, playing with the kids, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And the trickiest thing to place in those three circles is masturbation, without question. For some people, it's an inner circle activity. It is part of my addiction. I can't do it, or I'll be doing all the other stuff too. For a lot of people, it's in the middle circle. That's where it is for me. It's a behavior that I need to pay attention to. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this to self-soothe? That's not so great. There are other things I can do to self-soothe. You know, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I get out of bed, I go lay on the couch and turn on the TV, and the TV puts me right back to sleep. Works for me. Doesn't work for everybody. I don't keep any electronics in my bedroom. You know, and for some people, masturbation might be part of the outer circle, and it's kind of rare, but I've seen instances where masturbation is a healthy activity because people are so messed up from abuse that it helps them kind of work through and work away. Anyway, I don't want to get too into the weeds there, but you may want to talk to your support network about where masturbation belongs in your circle plan.
Great point.
Hi, I'm a recovering sex addict. I've been sexually sober for about 5.5 months. That is awesome. I'm experiencing headaches, equilibrium imbalance, chest tightness, digestive issues, nausea, trouble concentrating, and some of these symptoms persist throughout the day, and some of them come and go. I don't feel like I'm getting ill, but it's definitely out of the norm for me. Is it possible that I'm still experiencing withdrawal?
Yeah, great question. There is something, a real thing, a phenomenon called PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome. We see this with drugs. We see it with some sex addiction as well. It typically goes out to about 6 months, but it includes a lot of the stuff you just mentioned. People get, you know, sleep disruption, mood irregularities, depressed mood, hopelessness, fuzzy thinking, impulsivity, feeling great one moment and feeling really sad and in tears the next, to inability to make decisions, just kind of a fuzziness, and it's a thing, and it's pretty normal in terms of that early recovery process that extends out, as I say, to about 6 months. So I think, you know, if there's a physical problem that, you know, chest tightness always, you know, concerns me a little bit, but you can have all kinds of weird physical symptoms that go with this. I think that aren't too worrisome. You know, obviously you have to take your own health status into account and make sure you maybe run it by your doctor if there's something that you're concerned about symptomatically. But in general, we have this incredible mind-body connection, right, with our addictions, and it affects our bodies in ways that we don't even really think about. And so this does happen. So generally over time, it should start to straighten out. And I think that'll be your experience, but just really continue to monitor it. I think, as you say, they come and go. Just, you might also want to Google PAWS, P-A-W-S, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, to get a fuller list of the symptoms that can occur. But it's not all that unusual. As I say, they do tend to taper off after a while, but I would, for the most part, for most people, they're just annoying, troubling, aggravating, because, you know, you can't make a decision, or you can't seem to get a good night's sleep, or it's frustrating. But for the most part, it's not, you know, dangerous or life-threatening or anything like that. But you'll definitely notice it, and it's aggravating. So yeah, I just keep an eye on it. But I wouldn't. I mean, I think it's pretty much in the realm of normal to have that kind of stuff. There's one thing I'll talk about. We talk about it a lot with our clients. This thing called Anhedonia, which is this perhaps the most troublesome feature of PAWS, but it's this inability to experience pleasure. And literally, when we have these intensity addictions like sex and porn and chemsex, as I've mentioned, it kind of hijacks the brain's, what they call reward circuitry, to such a high level that normal kind of everyday stuff that used to give us pleasure doesn't, and that can be our favorite comfort food, or playing softball with the kids, or being around our family, or whatever kind of wonderful things used to make us all feel warm and fuzzy just doesn't cut it anymore. And that does come back, but it's because the addiction has kind of so hijacked and reset the bar towards such high stimulation required to feel anything, that anhedonia is the term. It just, everything's kind of gray and dull. And part of that, by the way, is physiological. The brain has made some adjustments to deal with the stimulation of these addictions. And so that takes time to heal, basically. So it's all pretty normal.
I think this is a great question for this particular webinar, because all of your techniques listed for stress management can be used to combat a lot of these symptoms that, take care of our bodies, eat right, exercise, do some breathing, do some muscle relaxation, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, mindfulness, shifting gears just to get ourselves out of our head, because a lot of pause, I think, lives in the head and travels to the body, and connect with others. That's always the antidote for almost everything, except for coronavirus. Don't. But,
the exception proves the
go
rule.
easy on yourself. Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I have things like that, I get so worked up about having things like that, then I make them worse, particularly headaches. But yeah, just take it easy, do some breathing, go for a walk, and yeah, hopefully it will abate. If you've been to the doctor, that you've had a workup and the doctor can't find anything, this is where you are.
And the other thing I just mentioned is just be mindful of when do those things occur? Are they consistent, or do they occur at certain times of the day, or when you're having certain feelings, or you start to connect them? Because usually there's a pattern. There's stressors or uncomfortable feelings, or something is triggering them in our lives. They're often just not random. So yeah, pay attention, and you might actually get some information that's useful going forward.
Yeah, and congratulations again. 5.5 months of sobriety is awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
My therapist is helping me uncover memories of childhood, emotional neglect, and enmeshment. Now I'm finding it difficult to interact with my parents for just 5 minutes. I've been here without exploding in anger or tears. How do I maintain a relationship with my parents without putting myself in danger? I've been keeping a distance to protect myself, but I fear that I may be slipping into social anorexia.
Great question. Yeah, and I think for those of us that work on those childhood issues, at times, this is not an uncommon situation. So whether there's trauma, childhood emotional neglect, and I think we're coming better to understand that neglect can be almost as traumatic as abuse, if not the same, because it's a form of abuse in a way. And enmeshment, for those folks that don't know that term, enmeshment is when there's really poor boundaries and roles between members of the family. And so, for example, a son, if there's a distant, kind of absent or addicted father, for example, the son in the family might be kind of brought in by the mother as like a little, like her husband basically, and they get way too much information about the parents' relationship, and there's kind of no boundaries, and everything's kind of enmeshed and all kind of in unhealthy ways.
And it is every bit as damaging in the short term and the long term as overt sexual abuse. The term for it is actually covert sexual abuse.
Right, it is, absolutely.
And yeah, they picked that term for a reason.
Yeah. And so when that happens, these are really significant issues that impact development. And when, as adults, we kind of discover that, and when it's often given a name by our therapists and we can identify the issue and the patterns, of course, there's a lot of feelings that happen as a result of that. You have a lot of anger, resentment, real distress about it. And so in a way, your reaction is not that unusual. It's probably a healthy reaction to a sense and to an extent, in that you're feeling your feelings. What I guess I would do is to really set really firm boundaries. I've had a lot of clients who benefited from just setting real limits on interaction with their parents. Sometimes a family timeout is not a bad thing, with just not agreeing not to really have interaction for a month or 3 months or something while you're working it through, or to have limited interaction, but do whatever you can do to protect yourself. Because what's happening right now is that you have this new awareness. You're kind of exploring what this all means, and you're now kind of reestablishing boundaries that were kind of crashed in by your parents. And so that's a painful process, and it's painful because you're now establishing limits and boundaries and edges that shouldn't be violated. And those probably might be challenged by parents who may or may not know what they're doing. So, I mean, it's a painful process because you're kind of establishing yourself now. And so I would do whatever you can to make it comfortable. Now, you do mention this thing about worrying about moving into social anorexia, which is a concern. So I guess I would encourage you to reach out and start building a social network that is exclusive of your parents and that family unit. Just really broaden out in other directions, and including people that have had this experience. There are a lot of people out there. There's a lot of support groups that deal specifically with this issue that I think you would really find solace in and support, moral support, if nothing else. And sort of also in those kind of groups, it's very valuable to see how other people are managing these very same situations, kind of establishing boundaries as adults in a healthy way, kind of maintaining respect, demanding respect as well, and trying to maintain or salvage a loving relationship, but it has to be on new terms. And that's what's painful for people. Yeah.
Yeah, you just described, my early recovery right there. And exactly what David said, setting some boundaries and finding a different social support network. I had to turn elsewhere for things that I used to get from my parents because I could not stomach being around them for all that long. And I couldn't stand to be touched by it at all. Just all kinds of stuff. I had to put some boundaries up, and they didn't really understand, but they respected it mostly. And what has happened, and this is the good news, is my relationship with my parents has healed. I get along with both of them very, very well now. I enjoy spending time with them. They enjoy spending time with me. While we've all been quarantined, I've been on the phone with my parents probably 3 to 4 times a week. They live a couple thousand miles away. We usually talk like once a week. It's been it can heal, but the process of healing from what you're describing is not much fun. But it's worth it. It is worth it. So please keep doing your work. During this very difficult time, I have been more grateful than ever for my addiction and journey in recovery. The tools and the steps have been invaluable to helping me deal on a daily basis with the health crisis. How can I work to avoid judgmental reactions when I begin to lose empathy for people near me who are hysterical about what is going on, rather than taking both a long view and ultimately guiding their lives by hope rather than despair? I want to give respect to my feelings, but avoid guilt or shame. Oh God, I want to hear the answer to this question too.
Yeah, I think you're describing a pretty common experience that's close to all of us. Yeah, it's really hard to be around somebody who is like, in this fear state. And, fear, as I've said before, is not a bad thing. I mean, we need fear to alert us and to be aware of what's going on in the universe and to protect ourselves. It's a reason we have it. It's an adaptive feeling to have. And there are certain situations about this whole coronavirus thing that should cause some fear. I think the problem is that if we get stuck in that fear and we start operating from that place, it can be really hard, probably most hard on the people who are stuck in the fear, but it also affects those of us around those people who kind of have to witness it and sometimes be affected by their reactions or overreactions or over concerns or hypervigilant about certain issues. And so, I think I try to practice compassion. By the way, for myself, because there's been moments when I've fallen into that, and I really have to kind of check myself on how much cable news I'm watching and how many articles I'm reading, and then there'll be something kind of personal that has happened. A couple people getting sick around me, and or worse, and so that suddenly it's all alive again. But I hopefully have enough tools mostly to let it go and find some and regain my balance. And so it sounds like you do that pretty well. But we are having to interface with people around us who have trouble finding that balance. And I sometimes try to talk to them rationally, my friends who are in that space, and that's often frustrating because they don't really want to hear rational talk. And then I get accused of minimizing, and all that. It just gets in a nasty, unfortunate back and forth. So I think my approach, honestly, is to kind of pull back from those people. I just try to give myself some space around them and pray for them, pray for myself, and just kind of wish them the best. And I practice a lot of gratitude. If I start to get, because to me that kind of fear is contagious, and if I'm around it too much, I kind of start to get that myself. And because we are empathetic beings, we pick up on that stuff and we internalize it. And so I think it's important to kind of have boundaries and protect myself from too much of that, because it'll make me crazy. And I also don't want to live, with my head in the sand and be a total denier, which I'm certainly not. But there's the sweet spot right in the middle between kind of this active awareness of the danger and then having the control of doing what I can do to protect myself. And that's the good thing, I think, in this whole coronavirus situation. There are steps we can take as individuals to have some control over what happens to us, right? We can't control all of it, but we're staying home. I'm wearing a mask. I'm washing my hands. I'm disinfecting doorknobs and all that stuff that makes me feel. First of all, it protects me, but it also gives me some sense of control over it. And to me, that fear space, when people are in it, is just a total powerlessness in an unhealthy way of powerlessness. They just don't have any control over their destiny, and that, of course, is disturbing. But frankly, I do wish all my friends well that are stuck in that space, but I also am spending much less time interacting with them right now.
Everybody, we have 3 questions left, so I'm going to ask David to answer them very quickly because they're all great. I'm going to skip to this one. I have a very difficult time reconciling my behavior on meth with who I am. I don't believe the insanity has a subconscious component. The thoughts and behaviors I entertain on meth have nothing to do with my sober thoughts and behaviors. Do my thoughts and behaviors on meth have anything to do with who I am? Am I acting out my subconscious? Because if I am, would that make me a sociopath?
Wow, that's a great question, and one that people often worry about because of these kind of really dark fantasies that emerge from methamphetamine. And it's kind of, my answer is going to be kind of a blend, unfortunately. I think sometimes if you're looking at porn, for example, you'll find images, you find something that's really hot. I never thought of that. I believe it's resonating with something inside you in terms of different fetishes, kinks, sexual attractions, and so on. On the other hand, I think when people get into this really dark scenarios that happen with methamphetamine, typically sort of toward the end of a meth career, to me, it's the equivalent of having dreams when you have a fever. It's all kind of weird and it's not quite who you are. And I really don't believe some of those dark things are this sort of kind of sociopathic nature that's buried under this and revealed only through methamphetamine. I think part of it is the product of the drug. I do think, though, that some of the sexual scenarios and fantasies that we discover and resonate with us probably are something we had is in there waiting to be discovered, perhaps. But I think when you get into the really dark, violent, rough, sociopathic stuff, I personally believe that's the drug talking and the interaction of the drug and the paranoia that goes with it and all the kind of psychotic elements that go with meth.
Thank you. We should do a webinar on that one of these days.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. I am the partner of an addict. I've recently started acting out. I'm too ashamed to tell my therapist, 12-step group, or my partner, what is wrong with me? I don't feel like I belong in S-Anon or SAA. I am lost.
Wow. Okay. So, um, I would, you need people who can give you some objective feedback right now in your life. So I would pick a trusted person, and it's probably going to be a therapist, and really just work up the courage to tell that person what's going on. Because this sounds like one of those really valuable pivotal points that could be really life-changing in terms of self-discovery and finding out something about you and patterns. So I'd really try to work up the courage to talk about it. You know, shame is just this like 50-pound cinder block attached to our ankle. Don't let that stop you. It's not a valuable. It's not protecting you from anything. So I'd really work on sharing that feeling. I'm sure there's all kinds of reasons why you're feeling this in this particular situation, but you also don't want to go down a path of hurting yourself and acting out and developing your own addictive patterns that could be avoided. I mean, you're at a, sounds like at a really critical pivotal point. So I'd really work up the courage to tell your therapist about it, and don't let shame stop you. And believe me, a good therapist is not going to shame you or judge you. It's about helping you and finding out what's going on here so you can move forward in a safe way, in a healthy way.
Yeah, and believe me, you are not the first betrayed partner who responded for whatever reason, and there could be 100 different reasons, by acting out. So I strongly encourage you, just fess up with your therapist. And if you're in S-Anon, I would talk about it there too, because I guarantee you somebody else in the room, and probably more than one somebody else, will come up to you after the meeting or will share immediately after you with their experience with the same thing, and you can support each other. So don't be ashamed, be truthful, be honest. That's the way to heal. So last one here. This is a follow-up from the individual who asked about the porn brain. How does wanting to establish a healthy sex life with my partner of 19 years impact how I can move forward?
Wow. Well, I think that's amazing. First of all, is a partner of 19 years and then wanting to establish a healthy sex life. You know, it takes work and more creativity, I think, as partners move forward into sort of deeper levels of intimacy, but often gets less sexual. And so I think really establishing that is an amazing thing to do. I guess what I would say in terms of the porn brain, I would look at as motivation, and I would also look at the fact that you have a willing partner there to explore new ways of reestablishing sexuality. And I would also ask you to Google something called Sense8 Focus. It's a Masters and Johnson exercise for couples that is just about this. It's about reigniting, reestablishing an intimate sexual connection, but it does a workaround around the brain. The first couple times you do it, it's not a sexual exercise. It's more of a physical, sensual communication exercise. So it's Sense8 Focus, SENSATE Focus. Kind of strange name, but I think it might be really valuable for you. And I think it's, you know, and add that to your gratitude list, because so many people don't have a partner they feel emotionally attached to who's willing to do that work. So that's something that's at the top of your gratitude list.
Yeah, this is, you know, for a while, you probably have to spend more time focusing on emotional intimacy, reconnecting that way, and the sexual stuff will come around. The Sense8 Focus is a great exercise. You can do it many, many times over and over, and you learn more every time. And I love the fact that, you know, one of your goals is to, you know, reconnect sexually with your partner, because porn addiction will just shove you in the other direction. So this is so much of a bigger question than we can answer right now, because we're out of time. But thank you for asking, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. Don't forget about the Super Saturday recovery thing, which is on intherooms.com, not sex and relationship healing. So you can go to their site and find information, or we'll post it on our social media. Thank you, David, for the tips on stress management.
Yeah, great. Great seeing you, Scott. Great seeing everybody.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then. So.
Good night.